Welcome to episode 117 of Film Courage. My name is Karen Warden.
My name is David Brandon. Let's turn our attention to today's guest.
Here we go.
Sitting beside us here in the studio, director, producer Linda Goldstein Knowlton. Linda's work includes Whale Rider, just a film that you and I love, Karen. Shipping News, The World According to Sesame Street, and her latest documentary, Somewhere Between.
On the site somewherebetweenmovie.com, Linda writes, "My daughter's name is Ruby Goldstein Knowlton. She is 5, now 6 as of the airing of this show. When my husband and I adopted her from China, we had no idea what lay ahead. We became a family in an instant. But as I began to think about Ruby's future, I started to wonder how her coming of age would differ from mine. I began talking to older girls who had been adopted from China and brought to the U.S. a decade or more ago and plunged into a world not just of identity, but what it means to be who we are. My film, Somewhere Between, was born."
Somewhere Between exhibits the life of 4 young women, all adopted from China. They are typical American teens with hobbies and dreams, except they all harbor lingering questions as to who they are and where they came from.
Linda's been quite busy with the film. Both screenings at HotDocs in Canada were sold out, and the film also won the HotDocs Sundance Channel Audience Award. Somewhere Between is an official selection for the 2011 Los Angeles Film Festival. Please welcome to the Film Courage studio, Miss Linda Goldstein Knowlton. Hello.
Hello. So happy to be here.
Great to have you.
We're thrilled to have you here.
Very excited to speak with you, and we've been extremely touched by the film. It's just beautiful, very moving.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. It means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. Let's begin with your upbringing. What were your building blocks in the formative years that helped put you in the position that you're in today?
Okay. How much time do you have? Do you have a couch for me to lie down? I'll tell you the whole
Gestalt
story.
here, yeah.
Exactly. Fantastic. Well, I am from Chicago. Grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Highland Park, and then moved to San Diego. And when I was a teenager, so one right there, moving in adolescence, prepared me to make this movie to talk about what happens in adolescence. So that's always been a question for me in terms of what happens with people in adolescence. It's such a huge point of identity development for everybody. So that's one thing that's kind of always been on my mind. I have 2 older brothers. We grew up in Chicago, had a pretty nice life there, and they influenced me in really wonderful ways. I have a brother who's a scientist and a brother who is a green businessman, and really, really wonderful family.
Now, I'm sorry, you said you moved when you were a teenager, so you were kind of uprooted and had to go to a new school?
I did. That was culture shock. Moving from the suburbs of Chicago to San Diego, when I was in 8th grade, Levi's and Adidas were all the fashion, which I guess they are now, too, and actually polo shirts. But moving to San Diego, where everyone was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and I was not, and they're all wearing their Dittos and their Corkies, although Corkies are back now, and, wearing makeup and doing drugs, and that was, shocking to me. So it was really, really big culture shock.
So today, are you living out a dream that you had envisioned for yourself long ago, or is this something totally new that you never expected you'd be doing?
I had never an inkling that I would make films at all. Growing up, I wanted to be an English major when I went to college. I mean, when I got to that point, I always loved reading and storytelling and theater and plays, and I was the kid, lights were out and I'd have the flashlight under the blanket and be reading Nancy Drew or whatever I'd be reading. And I thought for sure I would teach or something, I didn't exactly know, but something to do with storytelling and literature. And when I went to college, my dad said, "What are you going to do with an English major? You'll never earn a living." And, every dad says that. And then my oldest brother, who's a scientist, said, "What classes are you taking?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking literature this and playwriting that and theory this." And he said, "You're not taking any science classes." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not, because I don't like labs. I'm not very good at them." And he said, "There's got to be one science class that doesn't have a lab. Look in the course catalog." So I did, and I will give him credit for this. And the one science class I could find was Introductory to Neuroscience. And I had one of those amazing experiences where the professor knocked me on my socks. And I became a neuroscience major, and I thought I was going to go to medical school. Wow. So it was, So I went down that path for a while, and then realized that I was not going to go to medical school. And and I took several different detours. I worked in politics. I worked for the governor of Rhode Island. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., thinking that I was going to work in politics, and couldn't find a job in politics that paid. And I answered an ad in the newspaper for the American Film Institute to be a secretary, which, because they didn't call them assistants then, it was a secretary. Right. So, and I worked at AFI, and I learned all about film. I immersed myself, and I realized, oh, this is storytelling. I've come full circle, very long, random circle. But I came back to storytelling in a totally different medium. And it got me really excited because it was a collaborative medium. And I thought that was an exciting way to tell stories.
And what was the break that led you to producing?
Well, I was working at AFI, and I was working in their kind of special events department. And we would produce big fundraisers, actually, to raise money for film preservation. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got the beginning tastes of producing there. We did something at the White House. We did different things in LA. So that kind of got me involved in producing. And in my course of seeing what was going on at AFI and what different people did in jobs, I knew that I didn't want to write, and I really thought I didn't want to direct. And I thought, being a creative producer would be the way to go, because it was the right combination of storytelling and being involved creatively, but also not being creative and problem solving, which I felt I could really add to the pie and all of that. So, and I thought they did everything at AFI except make movies. They taught people how to make movies, so eventually I had to move on. And so I did what a lot of people do. I did catering and craft service and was a runner on a $50,000 feature. I was an assistant at Columbia Pictures, and I did development for a couple of different producers, and just worked my way up, and finally one day decided I got to do it myself.
We're gonna kind of start getting some background information about about your personal story here. Because this is much more than just a movie. This is real. Babies are being born in China, primarily girls who are being abandoned. Let's start with how did you come to your decision that you wanted to adopt one of these children?
Well, my husband and I, when we decided to create a family, we thought about a lot of different things, and we, as corny as it may sound, we feel like we are citizens of the world, and we were excited about adopting from China for a lot of reasons, a lot of personal reasons. And the process, we knew some people that had done it, and we could talk to them about the whole process. And there was something about the fact that they were primarily girls that touched my heart, and we just went off and did it. You fill out a lot of paperwork. It's like doing your taxes, except you involve Homeland Security, and it was, for us, we were very fortunate that it was a pretty quick process.
Well, let's see if we understand some of the background of that now. In 1979, was it, China implemented a one child, one family sort of policy? And as a result, a lot of the girls were abandoned because they're not considered, is it useful, especially in the farming communities, that the males are much more useful to the family system?
Yeah, I am not an expert on China, and I mean, I just have to say that right now. So, all of it is from my understanding. Sure. But, it's a 5,000-year-old culture that is one of the most complex things on Earth, and for me, I just feel like there's no black and white to anything. But there has been this one-child policy. There still is a one-child policy. It's been relaxed in certain provinces, but there is no Social Security in China, and especially in the rural areas where you need sons to work in the farms or in the fields or whatever's going on there in the rural communities. So they actually work and they're providing for the families, but then when the parents are older, the sons are their Social Security. Basically, they take care of them in old age, and the daughters get married and move off and all of that. So there is this very practical issue that they have to contend with.
And I understand with some of these children that sometimes they're just simply left by a roadside or with a note pinned to them. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that the girls that have found themselves, and boys too, that have found themselves adopted or at the orphanages in China, my personal feeling is that their birth families cared very, very much about them and put them in a place where they would be found very quickly. And so they would put them near a flower market or a fish market or in a train station, and in some cases near an orphanage. Not everyone knows where all the orphanages are in China, but they would put them there, probably in darkness. But they would put them in a place where they would be found because they really wanted their children to have a better life.
Well, let's go back quickly to the screening process. Now, you said it was a lot like doing your taxes, but with Homeland Security involved. Like, what kind of questions were you being asked in order to adopt a child?
Some very basic things: family background and what you do for a living, and income, doctor. You have to get a medical records and all of that. But you have to. I think it's like adoption anywhere, that you have to prove that you're not a criminal, things like that, on the state level and on the national level. And then so that's from the U.S. side, and then from the China side, there are really good questions. How are you going to raise this child? Philosophically, with a religion, just your philosophy about raising children and all of that. So to me, there was nothing. It was a lot of paperwork, but there was nothing outrageous about it. So
now, you say in the beginning of the film that you shot this over 3 years, and it began with your own journey when you adopted your daughter, who at the time was 10 months old. At what point do you go from being in that moment to saying, you know what, I want to roll cameras? There's a bigger story here.
When I was in post-production on The World According to Sesame Street, my prior documentary that I did with Linda Hawkins Costigan, and I knew, and my husband and I were doing all of this paperwork for the adoption, and I just knew that these two very complex ideas of China and family, and they were going to collide, and I thought there's going to be a film here. There's going to be something to explore. And at first, I thought that I would do a film trying to explore the birth families side of things, and I realized that two things. One is that I wouldn't really be able to have access to them, even if I had a Chinese partner, but much more importantly, that's not my film to make. That's a Chinese filmmaker's film to make. It's that type of film, to me, shouldn't come from an outsider. That needs to come from within if anyone wants to explore those questions. And about a year later, we had a reunion of our adoption group. There were 10 of the 14 families got together in the Bay Area. And it was the first time we saw most of them. And it was so exciting to see these girls and running around and happy and giggling and, just really healthy and doing terrifically. And to see the parents, last time we saw them, we were all, pasty and exhausted at 4 o'clock in the morning with our children in a hotel, lobby in China. So it was great to reconnect with everybody and see everybody thriving, basically. And we were driving home, my husband and my daughter and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 7-Up. I'm going to do the 7-Up series with these girls. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call it 8-Up, because 8 is lucky in China. And I have the good fortune to know Michael Apted. So I called him up, and I said, Michael, I would like to rip you off entirely. Is that okay? And he was very lovely and generous, and he said, sure, absolutely. It's a great idea. But he gave me a really valuable piece of advice, which was, he reminded me that 7-Up started as a one-off. And so he said, why don't you step back and really think about what do you want to explore with this film? And if you follow the girls every 8 years, icing on the cake. But really stop and think about what's the central idea you want to look at. And it was the best advice I got. And that's what I did.
Now, your personal story bookends this film. How was it for you and your husband to allow the cameras into your life? At some point, did you feel that it was too much, not enough? How was that?
I actually had no intention of ever being in the film. So the fact that I'm in the bookends and at the end in a bathing suit, that was never in the cards. So I feel like I've truly suffered from my art. But I got some feedback from some very smart filmmakers and showed them some cut scenes and some cut pieces, and that I wasn't in, that we didn't have these bookends. And they all said, why aren't you in the movie? And I said, yeah, because this is from the girls' points of view. To me, the most important thing about this film is that it's from the girls' points of view, and that I didn't want to impose anything. And they said to me, but you have to give context. You are an adoptive mom, and a filmmaker, and it'll actually be kind of strange in a way to not have that context of where you're coming from. You're not just an observer in this situation. This is personal. And they're very smart, and I thought it was really valid, really, really valid. So in the beginning, that's actually just our home movies, just shot on a little, home movie HD camera, and not even HD, what am I saying, mini DV camera. And at the end, like I said, I knew that I wanted to show my daughter at a certain age, and we were at the beach, and what am I going to do? I was in a bathing suit.
Well, I'm really glad you made the decision, because seeing the the bookends there, it really just draws you into the story. It really brings you in. So I'm really glad that you listened to these wise filmmakers that gave you that advice. It really just makes it that much more beautiful of an experience and story. We mentioned your daughter. When do you plan on showing your daughter this film? Because you made it for your daughter.
I did. I made it for Ruby. She has seen the parts that she's in, actually. So she's seen the bookends. Oh, yeah. But the rest of it, I really, probably when she's 13 or 14 is my guess. Okay. I feel like it's the girls start out 13 and 14 in the film, and I feel like what they're going through is right on for that age range, and I just feel like it's PG-13. I don't know.
Sure. We have a cat that we adopted from a shelter, and they made up her age and made her actually younger than she is. Now, I understand that that's something that they do with these children to kind of get them adopted. They maybe change their ages to make them younger. Is that right?
Well, I know that was the case with, or we believe that's the case with Fang, because she was adopted at an older age. And in terms of when children are adopted as babies, they don't know their exact birthday. But my understanding is when they're infants that they're not really switching their ages. It's just much more of trying to guess what their birth date is.
Another thing I found interesting is in the film, it shows some of the girls on a panel. I believe it's in Barcelona somewhere. And someone stood up and they said, how do you cope with the word abandoned? And they had different reactions to it. And one of them said, it drove me to be a perfectionist and compensate for feeling left behind. Is that a common theme with these girls? Because they all seem so together and mature for their age.
Yeah, they're very articulate. I certainly was not that articulate when I was a teenager. What was important to me in the film was to show a real range of experience. So for Jenna, that was her experience, that she had that inkling in the back of her mind all the time, and it did drive her to be a perfectionist. And with the other girls, they have different drives and different motivations, and that was important for me to show, that there's no one way to have this experience, and it's good. It affects everyone very differently. So some people dwell on it, some people don't. Some people, it might come up for them at an older age, or it might not even come up at all, and they'll be thinking about their identity in very different ways, more culturally, or I don't even know, in various different ways. Maybe when they're older, they'll think more about the gender part of it. I asked all the girls in the beginning, how do you feel about being a girl? Does it affect you at all, being a young woman, knowing that you have the life you have because of your gender? And I really dated myself, because they all looked at me like I was a Martian. Like, yeah, I'm a girl. I can do whatever I want. I can, so it was no... And so maybe we've come a long way and it won't affect them, and maybe that's just something that hits you in your 20s. I'm not sure.
Linda, let's talk a little bit about the logistics and the challenge of, here you are, you're raising your adopted daughter, and at the same time you're directing and producing this film. How are you doing that? How are you balancing these two worlds?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Ask the people around me. It was really hard. It was my first film as a parent, so juggling all of these new ideas of being a parent and being a filmmaker, it was trial by fire, and it was really complicated, and also very satisfying and gratifying. And thank goodness for Skype and iChat, because that made it all really, really possible. I went to China for 16 days, and if it hadn't been for Skype, I don't know what I would have done. But the time difference actually was really, really helpful. So when I was getting ready in the morning, Ruby was having dinner, and vice versa. So we actually had a lot of Skype time, which was nice. But the irony never escaped me that I was away from my daughter in order to make this film for my daughter. But so that was tricky, and but it all worked. Thank you to my incredible husband who made that hugely possible, and all the people, our family and our lives that helped make it possible. Ruby's very well loved, and everyone just rose to the occasion. It was great.
And where did you turn for financing, and what challenges did you face?
If you go to somewherebetweenmovie.com or our Facebook page, you can make a tax-deductible donation to help us pay for our movie that we're still paying for. I turned to, I'm serious, but I turned to everyone, literally strangers, but also people who have been fans of my films, some incredible angel contributors, and grassroots. I sent out grassroots emails several times. And people have contributed anywhere from $25 to many thousands of dollars, because logistically it's an expensive film. The girls live all over the country. I had to travel to see them a lot. 2 girls went to China, so those are 2 trips to China. 2 girls went to Europe. 2 trips to Europe. It was it's an expensive proposition. So, but people really rose to the occasion for that too. So it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress.
Sure. So what was your pitch letter like? I'm always wondering, how strong do you come on when asking for money, and how many times do you repeat if you don't hear from someone that you know? Do you go back to them?
I come on pretty strong. I probably follow through, 2 or 3 times. I mean, there's a certain point where you know that there people are not interested, and you don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Right.
And actually, one of my closest friends said to me, if you start another film without having your full funding again, I will do an intervention. And I've told that to a few people, and they're like, yes, we will be there. And actually, my therapist said, I will be there. So, so it's that's probably the hardest part of the whole making of the movie, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Like crowdfunding, yeah, you're never sure how many times to kind of go back to that well, and also how persistent to be, where you may turn someone off in the meantime. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of the size and the scope of this production team working on this movie, how would the team, the team members you have on this one, how would that compare to a film like Whale Rider, a narrative feature? Can you talk about the differences for those?
Sure. Well, it's funny that you mentioned Whale Rider, because that was also a filmmaking family, but it was in probably close to 100 people. And my documentary family is 4 people. So it's myself, it's my cinematographer, sound person, and editor. And actually my primary cinematographer and sound mixer. I call them my work husbands. So
That's great.
Nelson Hume and Ben Posnack. And I've traveled around the world with them, I can't even think, 15 times something. They worked on The World According to Sesame Street. They worked on this also. And it's a very tight, wonderful, familial team, and I don't know how I do it without them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're traveling, as you mentioned, a couple trips to Europe, several trips to China, is your editor going as well? Is it just the sound guy and the cinematographer and you that are traveling? So the 3 of you, so every time we see wherever the shot is, it's always the 3 of you together?
It's the 3 of us, and quite often. And so in those cases, I'm the Sherpa. It's really not glamorous. It's fantastic, and I'm fortunate to do what I do. There's nothing glamorous about it. So there's I think it's actually on our Facebook page. There's a picture of me where I have the sticks in a backpack. I have my bag. I have the sound guy's bag. I have like batteries. I'm like literally like I'm a tree. Like a hat tree. Carrying all the equipment. And then our editor was here in L.A., Katie Flint, although she's now moved to New York. And so bless her heart, I'd come home with these hard drives of material, and this is her first feature-length film that she edited herself. And I'm so impressed and proud of her, and again, couldn't have made this movie without her. And she had great perspective and just great skill in pulling a lot of story together, because it's 4 girls, everyone has a lot going on, It's a lot to pull together. So she really did it. I think she constructed scenes really beautifully.
What was the process like in you finding these 4 girls? How did you know that these were the right ones?
When you see the movie, you'll be like,
sure.
oh yeah, how could it be anybody else? But
sure.
I found them with the help of 2 wonderful organizations. One's called Families with Children from China, and they have chapters all across North America. In California, there's probably 4 or 5 chapters just in California. And through that organization, they've been very supportive, and Peggy Scott in Northern California helped me and introduced me to Fang, so that's how I met Fang. And then there's another organization called Chinese Adoptee Links, and through that organization, through a young woman named Jennifer Ju Stoik, who started this organization by Chinese adoptees for Chinese adoptees, she introduced me to Haley, Ann, and Jenna.
What was it like getting the families involved? I mean, how did you navigate through all of that?
Well, the families were just very kind and supportive and lovely, and just kept inviting us back into their homes and making us lunch, and it was really quite lovely. But I think the idea that because I'm an adoptive mom, and I could talk them through the idea of respect and trust, and that I feel for their daughters, that it's the same that I feel for my own daughter. I think that created a real sense of trust and being comfortable, all of us, with each other, because, like I said, we were in their homes a lot, and we traveled with them a lot, and they were really, really terrific. And I think one thing that happened was both the girls and their parents, specifically about the girls, they said, I mean, we felt we built a rapport, we felt comfortable with each other, but a couple of them said to me, I wish I had this movie to see when I was starting to be a teenager. And because I said to them, what you're doing here is a gift to all the kids coming up. And I think they could really feel it, and they really appreciated it. And so they liked having a voice.
But I think, too, it's not just for people who are adopted. I think it's for people, too, that grew up maybe without a parent that they never knew about, that was sort of always this idealized parent that was invisible. And you lose a sense of who you are, and you kind of always are looking for that piece and always trying to do something to kind of compensate for that. So I think a lot of people can relate to this, even if it's not just coming from an adoptive family. I know you don't call them subjects. I know they're part of your new family now. When you sit down with these girls that you're interviewing, how do you know the soundbite that you're going for? I mean, what are you looking for in that take?
The great thing about documentary, the great thing and the fear of documentary, is the unknown. So I have my lists of questions and where we're going to go, where I want to go, and then they take me down a different path, which is terrific. And so sometimes I'll see, we're going down this new path that I didn't expect, and that's where we're going. And then sometimes, I have a notebook still where I wrote in the notebook, this is going to be the last line of the movie, and I was pretty close, actually. So sometimes you just hear it, sometimes you know it, and then there's the crazy part, which is there's that incredible soundbite, that beautiful moment that you just live for it, and doesn't make it in the movie, but it'll go on the DVD extras. So, okay. But it's it's the only finite amount of time to tell a story.
And how much prep work are you doing, behind the scenes, ahead of time? Let me start there, and then I have a follow-up question, I guess.
So for prep, everything involved in prep is everything from plane tickets to visas to getting permission from the schools, from talking to parents to, any number of just regular old logistics. Actually, Haley took a picture of the word logistics in England, and she posted it on Facebook, and she said, "This is Miss Linda's favorite word." So there's just a lot of logistics. You have to post notices that you're filming. You have to make sure that you get people's permission.
And how much of the story are you crafting? Are you coming in with any sort of things that you're writing down, so many story elements, saying like, I have to get this, or I'm going to sort of manipulate this or craft this in a certain way, because I need this for the narrative of this film?
From day one, the intention of this film was to give the girls a voice, and for the stories to be from their points of view. So I went into this film not wanting to say anything. I wanted to give them a platform. And in choosing the girls, the subjects, I chose them because they were from very different parts of the United States. I really wanted to show, an example of America through these girls, from living in big cities to smaller towns to diverse areas to less diverse areas. But I also wanted to show, I found these different girls who have certain commonalities, but because they were born in China or just because they're adolescent girls. But I also wanted to, I chose these girls because they each had a different way of expressing their experience. They were having different experiences, and they were expressing them in different ways. So that's what I wanted, and that's what helped craft the story.
When you sit down with them for these interviews, what is like the shortest interview? Like, what is the shortest and the longest interview? When you just sit down and you're just rolling camera, and you finally see something and say, okay, now I know what we have. I'm just curious on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, do you capture that moment in 15 minutes? Or
Well, usually it takes half an hour to set up the lighting, so you're really going to make sure that you're, unless you're really on the fly and you're just, someplace, you're in a restaurant, you're somewhere, you're just going to, grab a quick question or two. So there's that. There's those kinds of moments. You're in the moment. You're someplace. It's not verite, but you're in the verite space. But then if I'm setting up for an interview and we've lit and all of that, I would say the shortest is probably a half an hour, and the longest is probably an hour, ish.
So you should fall within those parameters.
Yeah. Sometimes there's bathroom breaks. We get up, go a little longer, but and also kind of depending. If when we were on location, when we were in Europe or in China, and I knew that we weren't going to emotionally be in this moment again and in this physical space, sometimes we'd go a little bit longer just to make sure we really covered everything.
Mm-hmm. And within these 3 years, how many hours of footage did you end up with?
I've blocked that number out of my mind. Few hundred, several hundred. Wow. So yeah.
And was it just overwhelming to sift through it and just sit down with the editor?
You'll have to ask Katie.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the direction. So I imagine when you start this project, I imagine you sit down with these girls and you sort of share your vision, and you sort of, and I think you mentioned, you kind of said, this isn't just for my daughter or anyone. This is going to be something that's going to be a project for many people that are in your same kind of shoes. So I imagine it starts with a lot of dialogue in the beginning. I can also see it as it moves on, as we head toward year 3, that you probably just come in and maybe just set up the cameras and the dialogue. You don't need as much conversation. You don't need as much direction. Was that the case for this film?
That is the case. As the couple years went on, I would come to them. I was in constant contact with them by text or Facebook, because they don't email because they're young. So I would then come in for certain moments, knowing that there was going to be, Fang's art show, or there were different moments that we came there to capture. So that would be the primary purpose of the shoot, and then you need to still get some of that stuff that might be a voiceover or that might set up the situation. So you still always had to have a little. There would always be an interview with every trip, but much fewer at the end than there were at the beginning.
And in those instances where you are sitting across from them, what are you saying to them? What kind of direction are you giving them?
Well, I never really gave them direction. I just asked them questions, So, but it would be about, in the beginning it was the most broad. Tell me about school, friends, your activities. Activities led in a certain direction. So Jenna was on crew. She was the coxswain of the crew. And so we went off in the crew direction for a while and where that went. So it was really, everything was predicated. We did the big, broad net of questions of kind of everything about their lives. And then as we started following them, you put out a lot of fishing lines, basically. Mm-hmm. And you see which ones are going to be the most fruitful, and then you follow those lines.
And if you find that one of the girls was maybe censoring herself a little bit, how did you make her feel more comfortable?
Can't tell you my tricks of the trade.
We want to know.
There would be times where it's just talking. It's just
sure.
It's just
building that rapport.
It's building a rapport and talking about the emotion. And then there'd be some times that I would push a little deeper, and then there were some times that I wouldn't, because I felt that not just to be respectful, but I felt like if someone actually came out and said, you know what, I don't want to answer that question, that's private, I think by actually saying that, that's a very empowering thing for girls to hear. And in this case, no one actually really came out and said that, but I gave them that opportunity. I said, if there's something that you don't want to answer, don't answer it, but let me know. Because I think that, by the very nature of when these girls walk outside with their families, their history, their private story is public.
Sure.
And so people feel that they can then talk to them about anything and ask them anything, and maybe out of good nature, but there's not a really great language to talk about adoption, and I think that some people I don't think you need to treat it with kid gloves, but I think that there's a sensitivity that people don't have, partially because it hasn't been normalized with a lot of language. So I think that for the girls, sometimes people just expect them to answer every question. And so I really wanted to give them the opportunity to empower themselves and say, you know what? That's my story. I don't want to talk about it.
Sort of build up a sense of boundary.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not that there's anything to be ashamed of, but you know what? I don't feel like talking about it.
Yeah, it's their life, it's their story, and they're protective of it. Understood, yeah.
And here in the early going, the film has connected with audiences. You've gotten into HotDocs. You're currently at the LA Film Festival, so you're receiving recognition from some of the largest, most prestigious outlets that you possibly could. How has the heat, or how much heat sort of comes from being involved in these prestigious festivals?
Well, we're in our own bubble making this film. We feel really, really good about it, and hope that other people feel the same way. So when we got into HotDocs, it was, a huge honor. It's an incredible, incredible festival. So we were so proud to be there, and then we won the audience award, and we, just knocked our socks off. So that was really, really incredible that the audience is connected in that way, and also sitting in the theater and feeling. It's that communal experience watching a movie with an audience, and when they laugh and when it's dead silent except for sniffles, you feel it in the room, and that was really it was very exciting. And then to get into the Los Angeles Film Festival, which is awesome, and it's been just a great experience being a part of this festival. It's nice. It's getting the attention, and so now hopefully, we'll find ways to get it out to broader audiences and out into the world, and that, so to participate in festivals and then to get a broader distribution.
What would have happened had you not gotten into these festivals? What would your strategy have been?
Bite your tongue. You know what? I just would have it's the persistence.
Sure.
Just would have kept applying to festivals, and it is this new world of distribution that I barely understand. Shifting big gears, but there's a lot of really interesting distribution strategies going on now with VOD and different types of DVD situations and streaming and all of that I'm trying to wrap my head around. So there are a lot of exciting opportunities that aren't just straightforward distribution, which of course I would like too, but it just would be exploring all different ways of getting the film out. And one thing that's been really fun, I'm loving Facebook, is hearing from people all over the country and from around the world saying, when can I see it? When are you coming to Australia? When are you coming to the UK? When are you coming to Spain? When are you coming to Raleigh, North Carolina? We want a screening, we want a screening, we want a screening. So that, that's exciting.
So it sounds like you need to empower that audience, is what it sounds like.
Definitely go to the Facebook page and like us. It honestly makes a difference.
Yeah, you should consider maybe Eventful or something along those lines, where people can literally, say I want to see this screening, and give them the tools to get behind it and screen it. But it does sound like you did have a festival strategy. It sounds like that you initially targeted the higher caliber festivals. So was that part of the plan, to go after HotDocs, to go after LA Film Festival, and then if need be, then sort of scale down to maybe a smaller scale film festival? Absolutely,
yeah. I've had really great fortune of going to some top caliber film festivals with my films. So that's, I just followed the same strategy, followed the same path, and felt strongly and that we would be received well. So happily, it started with HotDocs for our world premiere in LA, for our US premiere, and we sold out last night. So if you want to come, buy your tickets now. 4:30 on Wednesday and 7:30 on Tuesday, and that's actually already gone rush. So you'll have to get in line.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we saw this crowd of people around you yesterday. It was nice to see that. So you've mentioned that you really wanted to give these girls a voice. What's the message you want to leave people with?
There's several messages. Most importantly, there's no one way to have this experience, that whatever you as an adoptee, you as a person are experiencing, that's a valid experience, and there's no right way or wrong way. There's nothing you're supposed to do. There's nothing you're supposed to feel. That it's really important that your feelings are fair and true, and that's the way to go with it. And I hope that there are some people out there who watch the movie and say, "Oh wow, I feel that same way," and I didn't feel comfortable talking to someone about it, and now I can see that I'm not alone in that feeling, that someone else is having that same experience or that same feeling. And it's been, you touched on this before, that this is not just for adopted people or adopted people from China. I mean, people have come up to me after screenings and saying, "I'm not adopted, but I related in this way," and for any number of reasons. And it's been really interesting, Asian Americans coming up and saying, "I grew up in small town someplace, and I related. I'm not adopted, but this is how I related." And then people of all different backgrounds saying, "I relate to this way," because it's the most universal thing, is developing your identity and where you fit in yourself and where you fit in your world. And this is also where you fit in your family.
Sure. No, it's beautifully put, and I think it does help people articulate those feelings that maybe they didn't even know they were there, and then they see them out there with these girls' stories and really feel a sense of connection. So the girls have seen the film?
Yes, they have. All four girls and their families.
Okay.
I flew out to each of their homes and showed them the film. I mean, I just couldn't imagine putting it in the public without showing them first. I mean, they were so generous, all of them, the girls and their families, with their lives. So I just I needed to show it to them first, and they were all, it's a little weird seeing yourself. Sure. But they were all very proud to participate, and they liked it.
Great. We've been speaking with director-producer Linda Goldstein Knowlton. Go see her movie. And you can also keep track otherwise by visiting somewherebetweenmovie.com, and also go to the Facebook page and like it. And there is a donate button on the website.
Tax deductible.
Okay.
Tax
Very
deductible.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you
so much. Thank you for spending time here in studio with us.
Story.
It is a beautiful story, and it's just great to see, a loving mother, make this well-crafted, just well-produced film for her daughter. It's just beautiful.
No, thank you so much. It's been great talking with you both.
And until next Sunday, have a great week.